pressure. It's getting stronger.
Today, and it just sort of got out of hand.
Yeah. A big golden nugget.
Okay, we'll try to get you the answers before this show is over.
Oh, dear. I won't have any embarrassing scenes.
I beg pardon? Just slightly to the crack of the opening, and that's...
Good evening. We welcome all those who have come to this public hearing of the Cable Franchise Review Committee. I am Gilbert Savery, Committee Chairman. We are pleased to have so many interested citizens watching at home. Also, we thank the Lincoln Public Schools for making these facilities available. Mayor Mike Johanns is with us and has comments to make at this time. At the conclusion of his remarks, I will list guidelines to be followed in this evening's session. Mayor Johanns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of this advisory board. I'm going to intentionally keep my comments very brief because I have a sneaking suspicion that you may have a lot of comments after me. It also occurred to me in thinking about my comments today that this is really not an opportunity for the mayor to voice his views about what should or should not happen. It's an opportunity for the community to speak, and that's what this is all about. I had my opportunity to make my way around the table before we started here, and I commented to a couple of you that this is truly how democracy should work. We have a citizens board that has spent a great deal of time working on a number of issues. Public access happens to be one of them, but there were a number of issues that we asked you to consider and you did consider. Now I think we've had a full airing of views and differing viewpoints, and now it's the community's opportunity to come before you and voice their opinion. Hopefully not only about public access, but about some of the other areas that we've talked about. Certainly public access is the thing that has grabbed the headline, but I hope in terms of the comments that you hear tonight, you will hear some comments about multicultural programming. Our community is changing, and it's appropriate that we consider having that kind of programming in our cable system. There's also something else that I think is very, very important to recognize, and that is that with the rebuild of the cable system, we truly have the opportunity of having one of the finest cable networks anywhere in the country. We can use that for many, many good purposes, and I hope people will speak to that issue. I want to say finally to all of you who have spent what I know to be hours and hours and hours working on the issues that we have delivered to you. We at the city are very appreciative for what you've done, for the time that you've given up from your jobs and your families to assist us. I know the City Council and myself anxiously awaits hearing from you at this point. I think finally I would like to speak very briefly to the procedure I anticipate now so the community is aware of what's next. I would anticipate after the public hearing that you will meet again and cast your votes or however you decide to bring your report forward. I would also anticipate at that time that we will have a preliminary session with the City Council. Then we will go into a phase of negotiations, I would anticipate, with the Cablevision people with a view toward bringing some final suggestions back to the City Council, hopefully in the immediate future. Let me just wrap up again by saying to each of you, thank you, and to the community members that have taken the time to come out tonight, we appreciate their attendance at the hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Johanns. We appreciate your interest in the committee's work, and we hope that we will also be able to come forward with some proposals that will be helpful to the city. Now, starting at my far right, I would like to ask each of our committee members to identify themselves by name.
My name's Daniel Kalish from Lincoln Southeast High School.
Dale Watosic.
Alan Peterson.
Donna Peterson.
Theresa Bollerup.
Ross Tegler.
Rosemary Mahachek.
Sam Seaver.
Leola Bullock.
Donna Hart Gailey.
Hubert Brown.
I am retired. One of our members is, as you have heard, a high school student. All others are employed, yet each serves on the committee as a private citizen and does not represent a firm, profession, group, or institution. It should be noted that the City of Lincoln and Cablevision signed a 15-year franchise agreement in 1985. It is subject to review every 3 years. Currently, the system is being rebuilt to accommodate many more channels and for other areas of the city. This franchise review committee is purely advisory and has no authority to alter the terms of the franchise. We have, however, been appointed by the mayor to gather information for him and the city council. The facts, observations, and opinions our committee has discussed and those expressed here tonight will be helpful as city representatives meet those of Cablevision to evaluate how well the franchise is working to date and what permissible adjustments might be desirable. Lincoln also has a continuing cable TV advisory board. Some representatives of that board are present tonight. We have had one joint meeting with that group. Tonight, however, we are here to listen to you. You might have questions, and we might have questions. However, this is not a debate, and I hope that we can maintain a high level of civility as we conduct our hearing this evening, because we're here for information and not for performances. We decided against strict time limits, but believe 5 minutes is reasonable for those who wish to testify. We hope everyone will avoid lengthy presentation or extensive repetitions of views previously expressed. As chairman, I will interrupt if it appears that unwarranted use of time might prevent others from being heard. If this hearing is lengthy, we might take 1 or 2 short breaks. Persons attending have access to copies of topics and options our committee has discussed. A few days following this hearing, as the mayor has indicated, these will be refined and sent to Mayor Johanns. For the viewing audience, Alan Peterson will briefly summarize major cable subscriber concerns. Donna Peterson will summarize government and education access. Theresa Bollerup will summarize public access. I now call on Mr. Peterson for his summary.
All right, Gil. There were 5 diverse issues that we talked about, which we simply have put under the category of subscriber concerns, and I will list those for the audience and briefly comment about what the nature of the issue was. The first one on my list is the question of possible regulation of the basic tier rates. That is to say, the city of Lincoln, under some conditions, would have a right to claim it could negotiate how much should be charged for the basic tier of cable services. It's a legal issue and somewhat complex, but generally, we were told, and the law seems to provide in the Cable Act of 1984, that in communities with cable, such as this one, if there are less than 6 competing stations, then under the law, the cable company and the city must negotiate, and the city has the right to regulate any change or increase in the cost of the basic service. We happen to be right on the line of whether or not we have 6 or 5. There is we have CBS, ABC, NBC, NETV. We have the independent Lincoln Channel 42, and then we have a UHF Channel 61. And so I know this gets a little technical, but the point is that if 61 is of sufficient power to be considered the 6th channel, as the cable company says it is, then we don't have any right, the city has no right to try to regulate the price. There's a side issue of whether or not the regulation of price would go only to the very basic service, which is the $4 or $5 service that simply improves your reception, or whether that regulation would go to the next level up, which includes the ABC, NBC, and so forth, but also includes 20-some other stations. Primarily a legal issue. We have talked about it. The thing that we have been asked to try to advise the city on is whether it should try to determine by technical means the strength of Channel 61. So there's I hope I've fairly explained that, but you can see it is a question of regulation. The cable company generally does not feel that we should be regulating that price, and they may be correct if Channel 61 is a 6th station. The city law department doesn't necessarily agree, but I'll leave it there. That's enough on that first issue. Secondly, we talked about the question of the pricing of extra outlets for customers. The cable company has recently instituted a new marketing plan, whereas the old extra outlet cost was $4 a piece, $4 a piece. The new plan allows the first extra outlet still to be at $4, but then anyone who wants to have additional outlets beyond that can have from number 3 to 8 inclusive at the single price of $5.95. The committee that's sitting here facing you thought about that. We realize that we don't necessarily have a right, nor does the city, to directly regulate that, but we can throw in our 2 cents worth. We suggested perhaps that's a little imbalanced in terms of the excellent deal for people who have 8 television sets, $5.95 for all those outlets, but is that being financed by those people who can, who do not have so many and perhaps cannot afford so many, in that they're paying $4 a piece for the extra outlet if they have only the 2. So that's the issue. Again, there's been not much resolution of that one among our committee. The third issue was the question of notification of all the customers prior to the time the rebuild, that is the digging up of your cable or the replacement on posts of cable, takes place. Have the homeowners been given enough notice so that they won't be startled to find their backyard being dug up and then put back together by people they don't know? There have been some complaints about it. The company appears to be working hard to improve its service in terms of notification. This committee definitely recommended that the city try to make sure that adequate notification take place. We suggested that more than the 2 days now being looked at would be appropriate. So that's the third issue. The fourth issue that I was asked to summarize deals with multicultural programming services. The rebuild is going to make many more channels available, and the company will be trying to decide which additional national television products to bring to Lincoln. We have indicated as a committee that we would like to see a multicultural target in terms of bringing a number of new services to Lincoln. We've talked a number of times about a network called the Black Entertainment Network. I have the list, which looks to me to have perhaps 100 different services available, many of them in foreign languages or dealing with activities in other countries, a number of different kinds of multicultural entertainment or discussion or news services and so forth. This committee is definitely recommending that the city try to negotiate and try to have a voice in the selection so that the new channels that become available when we have all these additional ones include a number of multicultural resources for all of us. The fifth issue that I was asked to summarize deals with the audio services that can be placed, as they say, behind the picture. If you're a devotee of the Weather Channel, for example, you may recall that there is music, which as I recall sounds like Muzak, but whatever. There are various radio stations which broadcast, and those broadcast signals are picked up and put onto the cable as a backup for the non-audio types of channels. We discussed how that resource should be made available to the community. There was discussion of whether the people who, or the stations that should be permitted to get on that cable service should be required to be nonprofit, educational, 501c3 corporations. There has been a suggestion that we fielded from other citizens that perhaps the restrictions on who should be allowed to use that audio backup should not be so tough. Perhaps it shouldn't have to be an FCC regulated station. That issue is wide open, and I know that's one on which we'd welcome some further input. That's all I have, those 5 issues, Gilbert.
Thank you very much. Now we'd like to turn to Donna Peterson, who will give us some information about the government and education considerations.
Thank you. I have 5 issues that I'd like to bring to your attention under the Government and Educational Access heading. Under the heading of free drops, the question was asked, what should the city's policy and procedure be for requesting free drops to educational and government buildings? There seems to be an inconsistency with who has a free drop and who doesn't. At the current time, all the schools have a free drop, but not every public building has a free drop. There's also a consideration about the length of cable it takes to place the drop and some of the charges that are being charged against those buildings, and that's under discussion. And there's been no motion made, except there has been some discussion made about having the city develop a policy that would create a procedure to handle the free drops. The second issue is channel allocation. Right now, the government and the Educational Access Channel shares Channel 5. And if you've tuned into Channel 5, you will note that the City Council is on Channel 5, the Lincoln Public Schools School Board is on Channel 5, the Planning Commission's on Channel 5, and many other programs are on Channel 5. It also picks up programming from the fire department, and they use that as a training channel. And so if you've ever turned into Channel 5 and it's been scrambled, it's because it's a program that the fire department's using for training, and you may not have been aware of that. There is such demand on time for the education and the government channel that this committee discussed the possibility of splitting those 2 channels, and there is room in the rebuild, perhaps, to allow that to happen so that the government channel would have a channel, there would be a separate education channel, and then perhaps a 3rd channel would be offered for training. The mobile van is another issue that was discussed, and it's under negotiation right now based on the last triennial review, and so there really hasn't been anything really done by the committee on that issue. The interconnection is a fiber optic connection. There's perhaps a future fiber optic system that will connect government buildings that would need some video, that would have the capability of adding video and would need to be connected to Cablevision at a cost of around $30,000. There was discussion about that item, but again, there is no motion on that item at this time. And the 5th issue is library video equipment. There is equipment for live productions. It's now located at the city library. Should that equipment remain at the city library? Should it move to Cablevision? And there's been no motion on that issue either. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to call on Theresa Bollerup to talk about a topic that has had scarcely any attention, public access.
Well, unfortunately, this was the topic that ate up most of our time. not everything we talked about with public access dealt with programming. There were actually 3 different public access issues that we considered. The first 2 were rather minor, and what we concluded at the end of our considerations was that probably the resolution of the first 2 issues was going to be determined by the big issue, by the programming issue. The 2 minor issues dealt with equipment and operational procedures. We have, the city has, $60,000 that will be available from a capital equipment grant. That money should be used, according to the franchise agreement, to purchase or to upgrade the access equipment. Now, the question that we tossed around in the committee is, what equipment do we need? There's not a lot of consensus about the kind of equipment that we have now and what needs to be done to improve it, or if we need to buy new pieces of equipment. There's also some problem about deciding what we need based on what we decide to do about the programming issues, about the content issues. So we really didn't come up with any motions on that beyond recommending that we request the money and that we survey the access users to find out what kinds of equipment they would like purchased with that $60,000. The second minor issue that we discussed was the operational procedures. How do we let viewers know what's going to be on the access channels? Not just the public access channel, but the educational access channel and the governmental access channel. Right now, the way it stands, the only way people can find out what's on the access channels is to read the screen that shows up in between programs. You can't look in your program listing guide. You can't look in the newspaper. There's just not much of a chance of finding out what's on. Some of the improvements that we suggested, and again, we didn't make any motions on these, we've just merely suggested these, reconfiguring the bulletin board channels that exist so that there is some way of you turning in every day to find out what's going to be on the access channels for that day. Running a program listing across the bottom of the access channel screens, just scrolling it across the bottom so that you could see what would be on. Picking up a separate vacant channel and during the day listing all of the programming that will be appearing on the access channels on that vacant channel. Ask Cablevision to list some of the regularly scheduled programs, those that are have been scheduled at least 30 days in advance, in the cable guide and provide it to the newspapers so it will appear in the newspapers. There was even some talk about having the programming put on flyers that would be available at the county city building, maybe stuck in your gas bill or your electric bill, that sort of thing, just letting you know what kinds of programming would be available. And then in the listings, however you get the information across, somehow indicating the materials appearing that will be adult materials, those that would not be appropriate for children. And as I mentioned, we have not come to any resolution on that. We just merely came up with a bunch of ideas. We have yet to boil it down to a firm set of motions to take to the city. Now, the big issue, the one that we spent hours and hours and hours talking about, and I'm sure the one that most of you came to talk about tonight, and that's the programming issue. Now, I think that we need to spend just a little bit of time making sure that everyone is talking with the same rules in mind. Channel 14, the public access channel, is there as a result of the contract between Cablevision and the City of Lincoln. It is there for the use of the people of the City of Lincoln, by the people of the City of Lincoln. One of the conditions for that channel's existence is that neither Cablevision nor the city can control the content of the programming that appears on that channel. The only limitation, the only content limitation that can be imposed on the programming on Channel 14 is that the materials appearing there not be obscene. There is a second limitation that can be imposed: indecent materials, and I will give you a legal definition of those in just a moment. Indecent materials cannot be kept off the air, but they can be put into times when children are not likely to be in the audience. And as that rule has been interpreted by some federal courts, that means after 10 o'clock in the evening. Now, anyone who's been reading the newspapers or watching television knows that there has been an enormous controversy concerning a quartet of programs. One of them was a program that was put on by the Ku Klux Klan called Race and Reason. There was another show called The Milk Show. There was another show called The Piss Show. And then the fourth show was Watching the Piss Show. The controversy erupted when Dick Bates, who is the general manager of Cablevision, refused to air the Piss Show. And that refusal by Mr. Bates put Cablevision in violation of the franchise agreement because that was an exercise of censorship on the part of Cablevision. Now, if I can, just to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing, I want to just read, and I know it's terrible to have to read anything to you, but I just want to read to you the definitions that have been given to us by the United States Supreme Court defining what is obscenity and what is indecency, just so that we're all working with the same ground rules. Remember that the rule is we can keep obscene materials off the air altogether. Those would be materials in which the dominant theme of the work, taken as a whole, appeals to a prurient interest in sex, according to an average person applying contemporary community standards. Second, these are materials which depict or describe sexual conduct in a patently offensive way, and that has to be taken care of by state law. And if you're interested, the citation to the statute is there. You can go and look up to see what our state legislature has decided would be patently offensive. And then finally, the materials are those which, taken as a whole, lack serious artistic, literary, scientific, or political value. All right? You have to have all three things present in order for something to be judged obscene. If it's obscene, it's off the air. And the city attorney and the county attorney have told us in very definite terms that there are ways available to keep those kinds of things off the air if anyone should attempt to put an obscene program on the air. Now, indecent materials are no less offensive to some people, but the Supreme Court of the United States allows far less control over these materials. Indecent materials are defined as language or materials that depict or describe in terms patently offensive as measured by contemporary community standards for the broadcast medium, sexual or excretory activities or organs at times of the day when there's a reasonable risk that children may be in the audience. Now, I want to make sure that everybody knows that what we're talking about here. Just because there's nudity in something doesn't make it obscene, and it doesn't make it indecent. Just because something deals with a sexual matter or an excretory matter doesn't make it obscene and doesn't make it indecent. Just because something deals with politically repugnant ideas doesn't make it obscene, doesn't make it indecent. Just because something is graphically violent doesn't make it obscene and doesn't make it indecent. All right? It's difficult to establish that something is indecent or something is obscene. What the Cable Advisory Board has done is establish a set of rules that say obscenity can never be shown on Access Channel 14. They have also said that indecent materials can be shown, but only after 10 o'clock. Now, some of the proposals that we have come up with in our wrestling with this issue are listed on the sheet that all of you picked up when you came in. The people who are watching this at home haven't had the opportunity to look at our options that we've suggested. So I would like to take just a minute to run through some of these so the people at home know what it is we're talking about. The first option that we considered was merely abolishing the public access channel entirely. The second option that we considered was to preserve the access channel as it exists right now, tell the Cable Advisory Board that we want it to enforce its regulations against obscenity and against indecent materials being shown at times other than 10 o'clock rigorously, and tell the city that we expect the city to support the Cable Advisory Board when it comes to some kind of decision that a program is indecent or that it is obscene. The third thing that we considered was Mayor Johanns' proposal. He would have us abolish the public access channel and in its place institute a community access channel. The community access channel would be run not by the city, not by Cablevision, but instead by a board, the members of which would be chosen initially by the city. The Cable Advisory Board would no longer have any control over this community access channel. The fourth proposal that we put forward was something that would happen once the rebuild is complete. We would allow each individual subscriber to elect whether that subscriber wants to have access channel 14 in his or her home. This is kind of the opposite of the scrambling idea that many of you heard about. What we would do in this case is leave the channel on the air. If you did not want the channel, then you could, through the or with the assistance of Cablevision, have that channel scrambled on your equipment. In making that decision, we would also provide a lot of descriptive materials to subscribers so that they would understand what the issues here were, and that if they chose to receive Channel 14, that they would probably at some time be exposed to material that they might consider objectionable. But that's how the First Amendment works. All right. The fifth option that we considered was leaving the access channel the way it is now, but then imposing all kinds of conditions on it. One of the things that we very strongly felt is that subscribers should be educated about how to use the public access channel, that they should be encouraged to come out there to Cablevision, use the studios to produce programming in response to programming with which they disagreed. We also thought it would be a wonderful idea if subscribers were educated about some of the means that they have available to them right now for controlling materials that they object to, keep them from coming into their home, such as parental control, parents turning off the television, the hours that during which indecent programming will be shown, parental lockouts. You can do that right now. You can have Cablevision scramble the channel for you at home. Program listings showing sensitive materials and so on. We could also require producers to identify themselves more fully and to accept responsibility for the programming that they do put on Access Channel 14. We can require producers to bear some of the costs that are involved in providing listings. If you have material that's going to be adult material, then perhaps the producers of that kind of programming should be responsible for the costs in advertising it as adult programming. Perhaps we can move the time back to 11 o'clock, the time after which adult programming can be shown. We also probably should talk to people in settings like this about the government's role in providing a forum for people to communicate their ideas. A sixth proposal that we suggested and really got some negative feedback on was scrambling Channel 14 for everyone. The people then who chose to receive Channel 14 could get some special equipment from Cablevision and would then be permitted to see the programming that they wanted. The problem with that became clear. Everything gets scrambled. Not just the bad stuff, but the good stuff gets scrambled too. And that includes a lot of the religious programming that shut-ins depend on. And it would be very difficult for some of the elderly people in our community to go through the rigmarole of getting the channel unscrambled. So we retracted our recommendation about scrambling. And then finally, there was some feeling that it should not be mandatory for producers of programs to put their names on the programs that they show on Access 14. That if we're going to preserve this channel as a public forum, then we should allow the possibility of anonymous speech. The only motion that we made after meeting after meeting after meeting, I think we spent 7 meetings talking about this issue, was that we weren't going to make a motion. And we were going to wait until we had talked to the Cable Advisory Board and we talked with members of the public at this meeting before we recommend to the city what it is we think the city should do. On the basis of what we hear from you and heard from the Cable Advisory Board, we're going to vote to rank things. This is the best proposal that we've got. This is the next one. This is the next one and the next one. So I hope that when you give us your comments tonight, that you will keep in mind that these are just suggestions that we've made. If you'd like to enhance what we've already provided you, please do. If you've got something different that you'd like to offer, please offer that. We're open to suggestions.
Thank you, Theresa. I apologize for the fact that we have had to go through this particular exercise, but we really felt that our hearing would be meaningless if you did not have the background that we have struggled with since this committee was named in December. I might mention that as late as March 1st, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a case involving many of the same issues that we have here, refused to even look at a case that had been on appeal. And I believe, as I recall, there were 6 votes against it, hearing it, 2 for hearing it, and 1 abstention. And so we are governed by the National Cable Act, which is restrictive, and that has been upheld by the United States Supreme Court. Now, I do need to say something at this point, because for our visitors at home and perhaps some of those of you who are here but would like to express yourselves but do not wish to get up and speak, you can mail comments to this address, and I'm going to repeat it. The Cable Television Franchise Review Committee, 129 North 10th Street, room 111, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68508. That address again is Cable Television Franchise Review Committee, 129 North 10th Street, room 111, Lincoln, 68508. We'll be happy to have those things, but we would appreciate your response by the 30th of this month. Now, our procedure this evening will be this, that persons wishing to testify should line up 2 or 3 at a time on either of the side aisles, then alternately step to the podium microphone. They should identify themselves by name and indicate whether they speak for themselves, a group, or an organization. Please sign only your name on the tablet that is provided at the podium. And if any of you, again, have written material to leave with us, we'll appreciate having it. So we are ready to hear now from the public, and we hope that we will be able to have some things said here that will be helpful to us, and we want you to express yourself candidly and
Good evening. My name is Radious. I'm not quite sure which group I'm representing tonight, so I will represent the Lincoln community. On November 20th, the Lincoln Public Schools Multicultural Advisory Committee sponsored a forum addressing the issue of cultural programming on cable television. A representative from Cablevision, Mr. Jeff Jarecki, attended the meeting. A number of community persons and students from the university expressed their concern regarding the lack of cultural programming on Lincoln's Cablevision. Some of the participants in the forum cited the availability of cultural programming in the surrounding areas, in Omaha, Scottsbluff, Kearney, and Grand Island, and could not understand why similar programs were not offered in Lincoln. That question was raised a number of times, and we have still not obtained a satisfactory answer from Cablevision. Angela Scott, a representative from Black Entertainment Television out of Chicago, was present at the forum. Ms. Scott, as well as Mr. Jarecki, informed the audience that there had been some discussion about getting black entertainment programming and other cultural programs in the Lincoln community. We have had numerous inquiries since the forum concerning the issues discussed. We want to know when black entertainment television and other cultural programs will appear on the local cable program. I have here in front of me something that was distributed to the audience, and it says that the new rebuild will provide room for expansion. There is presently room right now for expansion. There are blank channels on Cablevision. Again, the question, we want to know when black entertainment television and other cultural programs will appear on the local cable programming. I am asking you to respond to this in writing, and this has been sent to you in the mail. After we hear from you, we would like to sit down with you and discuss this further. We think that it is imperative that your office, that Office of Cablevision, promptly respond to this community request for more culturally diverse programs. Over the past 8 years, a number of people of color and people from the dominant culture have requested and contacted Cablevision and were told that black entertainment television and other cultural programs would become a part of the local programming. To continue to ask us to be patient with your office, that is the Office of Cablevision, in regards to increased cultural programming on cable television is an insult to the growing diversity of this city and to the viewing audience. There's a 6% minority population here in Lincoln, Nebraska. The demographic realities in this community are changing. Again, it's an insult to continue to ask people of color and people of the dominant culture to continue to ask you time and time again for cultural programming on television. This program was broadcast live on the public access channel 5 in November of 1991. Prior to that, numerous times people have walked up to you and asked you to broadcast cultural programming on cable TV. Cultural programming is not just important for people of color. Cultural programming is important for the dominant culture as well. Please respond to this response immediately. I have brought with me today 600 signatures from people in this community that are requesting that you acknowledge our request for cultural programming on cable TV. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your presentation. How could we have one from this side, please?
Thank you for this opportunity to testify before you this evening. The extra efforts you have taken as a committee exhibits the seriousness you have given to the issue at hand. Thank you for your commitment to this fortunate city. I'm the Reverend Dan Gangler, Director of Communications for the Nebraska United Methodist Conference, Chair of the Electronic Media Task Force of St. Paul United Methodist Church, and one of the producers of Worship at St. Paul, a 30-minute program of St. Paul United Methodist Church, which is cablecast 4 times a week over Cablevision Channel 14. I oppose the scrambling of public access channel for a number of reasons. First, St. Paul Church has produced a weekly worship program over public access Channel 14 since December 1st, 1985. Chose to place worship programming over public access because it was low-cost yet effective way to bring its worship services to around 350 homebound and elderly members who either cannot attend worship or find it difficult to be in worship setting on a regular basis. During the last 7 years, we have produced around 250 separate half-hour programs which have been used on around 500 hours of cable access time. Worship at St. Paul is produced by a volunteer team of 7 people. The Church has invested over $25,000 in equipment and supplies so that our members and other people in the Lincoln community might have weekly access to the worship service at St. Paul. Our senior pastor, Dr. Rex Bevins, says that he is amazed at the number of people in Lincoln who have commented about seeing him on the public access channel. As volunteer producer, we believe we are making a positive contribution to the life of our community through public access. Furthermore, we greatly appreciate our working relationship with Cablevision and our indebtedness to Richard Bates and his staff, which have enabled us to continue our program over 7 years. We are also indebted to the City of Lincoln for strong negotiations a number of years ago to put public access television in the cable franchise contract. Remembering when the original agreement with Cablevision was signed over a decade ago, the public access offering of Cablevision was one of the major reasons this city signed a contract with them. Secondly, as a production team, we believe that we highly exemplify what public access was intended to be in Lincoln. We have kept our part of the bargain and have worked within guidelines outlined by the Cable TV Advisory Committee. To scramble the public access would be discriminatory to many loyal and faithful users of public access who have operated within the prescribed guidelines and have not breached any of the Cablevision franchise agreements to public access producers. Thirdly, the scrambling of public access and the installation of descramblers, however you want to look at the issue, whether the descrambler goes in to take it off or put it on, becomes very confusing. I'm also concerned about the information that would be given out. If that information is very negative to begin with, people would not choose Channel 14 and would ask for descrambling right away. I've asked Naomi Hall, a diaconal minister at St. Paul, who works closely with the elderly of our congregation, to share her observations of what our program means to them and what scrambling the public access signal would do. Then I'll return for a couple closing comments.
My name is Naomi Hull. I'm a diaconal minister at St. Paul United Methodist Church. My prime responsibility is pastoral care, visitation. I see all the people who are homebound, those in nursing homes, retirement homes, and their own homes. Over and over again, as I visit every day, I hear expressions of gratitude from these people for the ministry of television. These services are crucial to their week as they enable each person to be in a sanctuary, to recreate their former worship experiences and hear the choir and our Dr. Bevins. Being isolated and removed from much of their former life, from church activities and worship, this service transports them back to the sanctuary that they have often so long loved. What I find out often is they're confused about time, even the time of the television. Frequently, I write it down and I put it in a special place for them just so that they are able to tune in at a certain time. If they had to also work at the unscrambling, I'm afraid half of them at least, I'm sure, would not even be able to, even though their real desire, even though they said they wanted the scrambling, might not be able to receive their services. I speak for hundreds of people who are unable to be here, those who are unable to leave their homes, but whose life is greatly enriched and whose faith is nurtured by worshiping weekly in their own church by television. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've given a number of suggested ideas. However, if none of the ideas on public access are working, I strongly endorse the mayor's idea of option number 3 and the establishment of a community access channel, and would be very favorable as a volunteer producer to work with that committee and that option. So with all the confusion that seems to be around the other options with public access, I at this time would maybe even favor option 3 more strongly than continuing public access television the way we have it. Thank you for your time and efforts.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jake Kirkland. I'm speaking on behalf of Multicultural Programming. I also will be speaking on behalf of as a cable subscriber. Several months ago in this very same building, we were discussing the same issue, whether or not there should be multicultural programming on cable TV. And here we are several months still talking about the same issue. And somehow I want to believe, in my line of work and visiting with these young people of our Lincoln community at the university, there's some ignorance going on out there about people of color. And having multicultural program will begin to enlighten people about the realities of people of color. However, I'm talking more so about the majority culture trying to learn something. And supposedly there's such great pride in Lincoln, Nebraska being the capital city or the all-American city. Well, why not put programming on the TV that reflects the community instead of just keeping it one way? I refuse to stand up here and give you a dissertation. I hope and pray that you will do what you need to do as a respective board. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Sally Herrin. I'm here as a member of the Zero Street Cable Cooperative and also as a resident taxpayer and a subscriber to Cablevision, and I support the brother and sister. But I'm above all here as an American citizen whose cherished and inalienable right to freedom of speech is in very great jeopardy right here and right now. And I'm here to say that I'm furious. I'm furious that Mike Johanns has so little regard for the law that he made no attempt to enforce Cablevision's obligation to air Donnie Smith's illegally censored program until Easter Sunday, the highest holy day of the Christian calendar, in an effort to create a stampede on this meeting of offended viewers. I'm furious that Mike Johanns has so little regard for spirituality that he would use Christian people's feelings in such a cynical way. I'm furious that Mike Johanns has so little regard for democratic process that he set up this committee just to knock it down, that he has not even had the grace to wait until the committee offered its recommendations before beginning his campaign to abolish the access station. But I am furious above all that Mike Johanns has so little regard for the public trust and for constitutional principle that he has never, not once, addressed himself honestly to the very serious matter of freedom of speech. And I am also furious with the mainstream press. That's you guys. The television affiliates and the two newspapers for failing to dog him on this matter. Some watchdogs. The press, better than anyone, should know how critical a free flow of opinion and information is, but you've all been soft on Johanns. And Mr. Savery, you've allowed Mike Johanns to use your professional credibility for this mocking of the democratic process. Shame on you, and shame on you all. Hear, hear. This forum tonight and this committee's weeks of work will have been an elaborate charade, and we all know it, if, as I suspect, Mike Johanns has already made up his mind to ditch the public access channel. I challenge you to prove me wrong, Mayor. I hope with all my heart I am. Make no mistake, I'm not against a community access channel. On the contrary, I think it's a fine idea and absolutely the best way to oppose racial supremacists, for example, by diluting and finally washing away their hate messages in a flood tide of humane response. In fact, Zero Street has been attempting for several years to negotiate with Cablevision for just such a channel, though we have never been taken seriously by the corporation. In fact, I think it's crucial that the city require expanded access, not just maintain the status quo in the new franchise agreement, especially in light of the fact that the corporation is reaping a return of 30% on its investment in this city. But a community access channel such as Mike Johanns proposes is a private corporation, and however well-meaning, it carries no guarantee of free speech and cannot substitute in any sense for that format. Let us have community access channels by all means, but in addition to, not instead of, Channel 14. My great fear, if Lincoln finds itself settling for anything less than an access channel with full First Amendment protection, is not for people like myself, the diehards who will take to the streets with no hesitation to make our point of view heard, and you know we will, but exactly for people like Donnie Smith, the marginal, the vulnerable, the unpopular, the otherwise voiceless. Mike Johanns and Dick Bates want to wash their hands of public access because free speech is messy. Toes get stepped on, constituents and paying customers get their feathers ruffled, and uncomfortable truths are spoken and heard. There is no doubt that television is an incredibly powerful medium. It is visual, immediate, and above all, it is in almost every residence in this city and indeed in the nation. It is the major imaginative vehicle of our society, and it is a marketplace without equal, which is why television is almost exclusively the property of the powers that be, the big commercial interests of this country. Only public access channels give average people a piece of this pie. A number of people have complained that young producers' programming is silly, that it lacks production values, but surely it is no sillier than, say, professional wrestling or the late lamented Gong Show, both highly successful for corporate sponsors, the like of which no one rushes to shut down. And if these young people's shows lack production values, they are refreshing by contrast with much network programming, or MTV, for example, which both have gorgeous production but dismal content. However you may disagree with them, you can't call Wind of Change or World Liberation, which deal with the most wrenching and complicated issues of our day, abortion, the deficit, political leadership, etc., insubstantial. In fact, if corporations and governments are starting to grow uneasy with access channels, I suspect that's because a whole generation of young producers, people like Justin and Lisa and many others, are growing up with a sense that they are entitled to television access. If we had elected a person of common sense and integrity to the office of mayor, that office would not now find itself in such a quandary. The answer to people who call up, troubled by what they see on Channel 14, is easy. The answer is turn it off. No one is compelled to watch. Viewers with overriding concerns about the channel can program it out of their households for free with existing technology. Your friendly cable company will provide you with the details. We hear a lot these days about the grandeur of the American system, our freedoms of choice in the ballot booth and at the cash register. We preen ourselves on our good fortune to be Americans as we watch the dissolution of the communist states of Eastern Europe, and we feel all vindicated and holy. But I'll tell you what, it wasn't any lack of 12 different kinds of sausage to buy at the grocery store that brought those governments down. It was all those years of the truth bottled up, the terrifying and unspeakable truth. So when Glasnost popped the cork, the pressure was too great and the vessel broke. You'll notice that in this country, it's always the people who thump the Bible hardest, whose alligator tears jump quickest to their eyes at the sight of the flag, that are the ones most ready to take away your freedom of speech. There is nothing in the world that could prevent a community access station from excluding all but what mainstream Lincoln considers nice and, above all, non-threatening. Freedom of speech is the linchpin of all our other freedoms, the one without which the rest are impossible to secure. You know that if you think about it, and the Founding Fathers knew it too. And that's why, in the series of amendments to our Constitution, freedom of speech comes first. Sorry I went long. Bye.